Hello students, welcome to COM 425. This is week 1 and we are going to be discussing and talking about an introduction to organizational communication this week. As you know, my name is Dr. Romo. I have included a Meet the Professor link and the course right above the syllabus. So if you have not read that already, you should hop on over there to go ahead and take a look at that. For those of you that don't know me, I am the program director for the bachelor's and master's degrees here at CBU Online in Communication Studies. I've taught here at CBU for over 10 years. I've been involved in the traditional main campus teaching and face-to-face programs as well as online throughout that time. In addition to that, I'm married. I have 2 children and love spending time with them and exploring ideas of communication when I'm not teaching. So looking at this course, it's anticipated that you have already gone through the week 0 information. So if you have not gone through week 0, which should have been done prior to the start date, it's important that you hop on over to week 0 before you complete any of the work. In that module, it shouldn't take too long for you to go through everything. Provides an in-depth overview of what we expect in terms of APA format and style, what we expect for academic writing, the expectations to how to access feedback on your work, as well as accessing our critical assignment at the end of the term. So most of the time, if there are major issues with your paper, I'm going to be directing you back to the week 0 module for tips and tricks on how to improve your APA and academic writing and things like that. So for this week, we are in week 1. We're reading chapters 1 and 2 of our course text, which is our Catherine Miller text on organizational communication approaches and processes. We're watching 3 videos related to different management styles we find in organizational communication, as well as a video on understanding what OrgComm is. We have 1 discussion board, which our posts are due on Friday, with reply posts due on Sunday, and a case study due on Sunday as well. A lot of this will make more sense to you by the end of this lecture, because I'm going to give you some good advice and instruction on how to understand and learn from the modules this week in the course. As you look at discussion number 1, you'll see that we are required to participate in multiple times within the discussion. Remember, meeting mastery or meeting that you've met the expectations for the assignment means that you'll write a 300-word post, post it by Friday, and reply to at least 2 students no later than Sunday. That's just to meet the minimum requirements. To go above and beyond and to get into that exceptional range, like at an A, it means you're going to interact beyond those 2 students and develop a dialogue and back and forth with other students in the course. This week, our prompt gives you a scenario looking at Emily's clothing store and asking you to choose 4 of Fayol's principles of management and how you think you could help Emily get her store back on track. Describe these principles in abstract terms and explicitly, and how they could be instituted within her store to help her manage and have better organizational structure. In addition, you should see how this relates to Craig's model of communication, which is illustrated in chapter 1 as well, and we're going to go over that as well in this lecture. So that's discussion 1, is asking you to look at Fayol's principles of management as well as models of communication. When we look at case study number 1, I did not include the whole case study here because the prompt because it's very long and can't fit on one slide. It's related to kid care. It gives you a situation which you will analyze through Blackboard. You'll read that scenario. Once you've read that scenario, you'll write an APA paper that is at least 3 full pages in content, not the cover page and the references, but the writing is at least 3 pages, that you're providing a brief summation of the case, how it relates to the content this week, so chapter 1 and chapter 2. Choose 1 or 2 theories from the course readings this week and describe how it relates to the case study. And then there's 3 questions looking specifically at how you can deal with some of the issues presented in the case study: the burnout of the staff members, the managerial style, what strategies you can help, and how you can start to do some of those things and help improve the management and organizational structure of that particular organization in the prompt provided on Blackboard. Now remember, I am looking for course text application, meaning you're citing the course text, of course, as always, but this is an upper division course within your undergraduate study, so I'm also expecting to see at least 2 outside sources on this paper. So you should have the course text and 2 other outside scholarly sources as well. If you have any questions with that, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you on that assignment. And you'll see that we have multiple case studies this term. They all follow the same format with a different scenario each time, so it'll help us get used to the format and be able to turn these out in a way to really start focusing on that analytical perspective. when you're looking at different views of communication, and this is covered in chapter 1, it's important to see that the transmission view is one of the ones that is used most often in organizational communication. We're going to get into one specific model of it this time. There are many different views. There's transaction views, transmission, interactional. We're going to focus on transmission and this week, and we're going to focus on Shannon-Weaver model secondly. You'll see that communication in the transmission perspective takes place between two fixed points. You'll see there's a beginning with a sender and an ending with the receiver, and this linear perspective considers the transmission process of communication, not the actual communication. So we're looking at how we send communication, how we transmit it, as opposed to looking at what we're actually saying. Shannon and Weaver developed this a little further. In 1949, they developed and they found that when we look at communication, we find that it's linear and focused on the transmission, yes, but then there's also an element of encoding and decoding that happens. So anytime we send communication from one point to another, we have a source that has to say something and a receiver that has to interpret it or decode it. We need to encode it. We need to develop it in a way that's palatable for the audience that's going to receive it. That's encoding. So if I'm going to send a tweet out on Twitter, it's going to look different than an Instagram photo, just to be specific in that sense. In an organizational setting, if I'm going to want to enact a new policy, the way I send that policy information out may be different than how I want to relay general feelings about a topic to somebody. So if it's a new policy that we really need to make sure we have buy-in from our employees and personnel that we manage, well, then we need to encode it in a way that will be beneficial to them or to help get buy-in. Maybe have a launch party, maybe call a formal meeting, maybe feed them lunch, encode the message in a way that's more palatable for them to understand. They can decode it and receive it in a way that will help you with the overall organization and flow of your corporate culture, which we'll get into a lot this term. So we need to look at how the source encodes messages and decodes them across this linear perspective, not necessarily the message itself. And what you'll find is in organizational communication, there are specific ways to do this in a linear perspective that have shown through research and trial and error to have been very successful in many different ways. The theory we're going to focus on in this week in this particular lecture, there are a couple different ones in the reading, but the one I want to spend some time on that we're using in our discussion as well as our case study is Henry Fayol's theory of classical management. So this theory was developed in 1976. Fayol is known as the father of modern operational management theory. He was a French industrialist who lived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. His major works in French and in the early 20th century was translated into English several decades later, and there's two main aspects of his theory that have been particularly influential and are considered to be very well known for, which is the elements of management and his consideration of the principles of management. And so when we look at his ideas of classical management in this sense, both of these components concerned with the managerial function of an organization. The element of management deals with what managers should do, and the principles of management deal with how managers should enact these elements that managers should do. So when we look at it, we can see that in the elements of management, which we're focusing on in this particular lecture, deals with 5 fundamental elements of management of what managerial work looks like. The first element is planning, which involves looking into the future to determine the best way to attain organizational goals. Fayol believes that the plan of action facilities the utilization of the firm's resources and the best methods for attaining an objective. His second element of managing is organizing. Fayol really felt that looking at this element in terms of the arrangement of human resources, employees, and evaluation of those employees, the third really can be beneficial to the overall flow of organizational structure and communication. The third element, Fayol really wanted to spend time emphasizing in the command element of management. This element focuses on looking through which managers set tasks for employees in order to meet organizational goals and how that communication is impactful within general workflow on a daily basis. The fourth element of management is coordination. It is through this element that separate activities of the organization must be harmonized into a single whole. Leading us to the final and fifth element of classical management, which is control. This element involves the comparison between goals and activities to ensure the organization is functioning in the manner planned to meet all organizational goals and flow of the production of whatever it is you're producing. It's really interesting to keep in mind that Fail did not include communication as one of his elements of management. However, with the possible exception of planning, his elements of management are difficult to imagine to have valuable performance without communication. That is, the organizing, command, coordination, and control elements of classical management theory all require communication to be effective, particularly communication between management and workers. Thus, we can see that communication can be an implicit part of Fail's elements of management. When you look at his principles of management, you can see that there are many different ways that we look at how these 6 principles are organized in terms of an organizational structure. That is included in chapter 2 as well. We're spending time this week focusing on this theory of classical management from this perspective. But what I want you to do and want you to spend time with is, as we look at these management organizational theories, you need to see that communication is interwoven into everything that we do. To be an effective manager and to have effective organization of a company is to have effective communication. We can't effectively communicate with those that we're leading. We can't effectively run a company. So it's really imperative to see the distinction between how those work in modern day applications and how these work within these classical theories. You'll see within chapter 1 that spends some time talking about the traditions and theories of communication. For those of you that have taken the comm theory class, you'll have a good foundation of this. If not, that's okay. We're going to spend time pointing out and pulling in how these traditions, like the socio-psychological one that deals with the sociological and psychological implications of communication, or the cultural implications of communication and such, really play a role in how we organize and develop communication at a managerial level within various organizations. It's just important to keep that in mind and point that out. As we recap and we look through the week agenda, we are reading chapter 1 and 2. We're watching 3 videos related to organizational communication, as well as completing discussion board number 1, which is due on Friday, with replies post due on Sunday, and case study number 1, which is due on Sunday. As you go through the Meet the Professor link, week 0, and all of the videos in this lecture this week, if you have any questions, please reach out. I look forward to interacting with you and pray you all have a blessed week. Like I said, spend some time getting to know the course and really diving into the material, and we're going to have a lot of fun and learn a lot of great concepts this term. Again, God bless and have a good week.